All right, let's do this shit. Only took me a fucking year to get to this one. Would you believe me if I told you that this road in Iceland is actually less dangerous than this road in Madison, Wisconsin? It sounds ridiculous, but it's actually true. And this road isn't the only example. On American roads, you're much more likely to crash and die than you would be if you were on European roads. Cars across the pond were involved in over 20,000 deaths on the road in 2021, which seems like a pretty big number until you look at America. Here, nearly 43,000 people died in a car crash in 2021. So, what's going on here? Why are so many people dying on American roads? Hi, my name is Nathan Denzine, and I'm a reporter with a whole bunch of awards, so you can trust me. Before we jump in, this is not a video on pedestrian fatalities. There are lots of YouTubers who have done lots of really good videos on the subject, and I'll link a few in the description. This video is about people who die in car crashes with other cars or in solo fatal crashes. And we don't just see more deaths on American roads because we have more drivers. If you do the math, per 100 million miles driven, America averages about 1.3 deaths, while Europe sits at about half of that. In my research, I looked at 5 things that could affect fatalities on the road: average speed, quality of the road, car safety standards, how straight, flat, and open the roads are, and the types of cars on the road. I know that there could be a lot more factors, but sue me, I have 2 other jobs and very limited free time. First, I looked at average speed, and it's basically the same in both places. Now, I could do a lot of math here and convert the kilometers an hour to miles an hour and tell you exactly how these stack up, but I don't want to do that, so all you really need to know is that highway speeds are pretty similar between the 2 continents. And America's a country. America's not a continent. I don't know why I said that. Between America, the country, and the continent of Europe. For rural roads, it's a lot harder to find accurate data for both America and for Europe, but what I did find basically puts crashes at a roughly proportional rate to each other. So with the type of the road out of the way, we move on to the quality of the road, which actually lended a surprising result. America, on average, has much nicer roads than the average European road. Now, this definitely deserves a little qualifier because the EU is not as strong as the American federal government. The American federal government is the one that is mostly paying out for road construction, new bridges, etc., while the EU mostly has individual countries pay for their roads, which leads to a situation where the rich countries in the EU have much nicer roads, and the poorer countries, generally speaking, have worse roads. For example, while it's not a rich country by any means, Portugal's roads average out at about a 6 out of 7, while the tiny little island nation of Malta has just a 3.3 out of 7. So I'm just going to call it a wash between Europe and America for this. American states some Ozzy. No. Do you have something to say, Ozzy? He's nothing. He just wants to help. In all, I'm just going to call road quality a wash between the 2 areas. It would be way too hard to compare apples to oranges here and take the federal government of Malta and compare that to the federal government of the USA. That's just not fair. Moving on to car safety, we hit another dead end. And that's because America and Europe actually have 2 completely different sets of safety standards that they test each of their vehicles for. American cars actually do have more safety standards that they have to pass than European cars, which leads American regulators to believe that our cars do perform better in crashes. So then that leaves us with 2 potential reasons that American roads could be more dangerous than European roads. For this chapter, I actually found a free download of the 2018 American Green Book, which is a guide on how to build roads in America. It is also 1,048 pages long, so I just skimmed it. What you need to know is that generally US roadways are set up to be wide, straight, and flat to minimize the number of decisions that a driver has to make on the road. Wide shoulders on rural roads allow for some swerving without hitting a ditch, while straight and flat roads allow drivers to see everything going on around them. But European roads, especially rural roads, are a little different. As far back as 2001, a report from the US Department of Transportation notes that in Sweden, wide rural roads actually have a terrible safety record and are not preferred to their more skinny, curved roads. Take this road in rural Wisconsin. There's a shoulder on both sides and about a half-mile of visibility until any kind of turn. Now, look at this road in rural France. The road is super narrow, and there are curves pretty close to both ends of the straightaway that we can see here on this image. This road encourages speeding by providing a false sense of security. This road forces you to move slowly so you don't fall off the road or hit another car around the corner. But there might actually be another reason that these straight, wide roads cause more crashes. Last year, the IIHS put out a report that said that America has way more drunk drivers than Europe, and I have a few theories why. First, in Europe, many homes are within walking distance of a bar or store, which is not the case for most rural areas in America. Second, roads in America were designed to inspire confidence and minimize decision-making, which is almost the exact depiction of a drunk person. Look no further than Wisconsin, where some people are still allowed to drive after 4 OWIs. People in rural communities drive to the bar, get hammered, and drive back because they don't feel that the roads are dangerous at all. But the types of cars that we drive might actually be the most important point of everything. Hey, everybody get on down to your local Ford dealership today to buy this big-ass fucking truck that you totally need. Ever go off-roading? No, of course not, but you need this shit anyway. How are you even going to take all your groceries home to your 2 kids without a lifted frame and a front bumper that could kill a cow? The brand new Ford F-150. This time, we just strapped a battering ram to the front because who the fuck even cares anymore anyway? The size of the vehicles that we drive in America is genuinely astounding. There are over 250 million registered vehicles on the road today, and over 60% of those are pickup trucks or SUVs. But it wasn't always like this.
You're looking at a 187-ton log train, and we're about to pull it with our tough new Chevy Cheyenne. It's a 3/4-ton pickup like this, with full-time...
In the 1950s, trucks were used only by blue-collar workers who needed a pickup to transport a cow or move lumber. The trucks they drove were low to the ground, with long, wide beds, perfect for loading and hauling. This is what an average pickup looks like today. These are huge, bulky monstrosities that can't usually haul as much in the bed and are much, much higher off the ground, which means that they're genuinely better at running over 8-year-olds than actually doing anything for work. And all of this happened because the EU wanted their own domestic chicken market back in the 1950s. Back then, almost all of Europe's chickens came from America, but leaders on the continent wanted to build up their own domestic production. Their solution was to impose a tax on imported chickens, so in response, Lyndon B. Johnson taxed imported pickups. American car manufacturers then realized that if they could classify their vehicle as a light truck, they would face much less stringent regulations than they would if they made a car. For example, early SUVs built on pickup frames provided about a 25% profit, where cars could be sold for just a 5% profit. So they started a marketing blitz to convince Americans that they needed giant cars, and it totally worked because Americans fucking love big shit. Today, instead of a family station wagon, you're much more likely to see a giant pickup truck or an equally big SUV. In fact, some of the highest selling cars of all time, like the Ford Focus and the Nissan Maxima, have been completely discontinued in favor of new SUV models. So compare this street in Madison to this street in Portugal. In Madison, which is typical of the rest of the country, we see a lot of SUVs, we see a lot of pickups, and we see a handful of cars. In Portugal, you see a lot of super mini cars, even more regular cars, a couple of small SUVs, and not a single lifted pickup truck. So let's take a look at 2 of the most popular vehicles in both countries, for America the Ford F-150 and in Europe the Mini Cooper, and compare their size. Look how unbelievably huge the F-150 is next to the most popular vehicle in Europe. Here's another example with an American SUV and a European SUV. It's a little bit closer, but you can still see that the American car is bigger. SUV and truck ads will also tell you that it's safer to drive this large vehicle.
I think he'll be safe in there. Yeah, me too.
But that's actually not the case. In his 1997 book, High and Mighty, New York Times reporter Keith Bradshaw found that occupant death rates are actually 6% higher in SUVs than in conventional cars. This could be due to a number of reasons, But a major one is that SUVs and trucks are actually not crash compatible with cars, and they're often not even compatible in crashes with each other. Light trucks and many SUVs are built with stiff frames that are built for hauling heavy items, while cars have much more flexible frames. When two cars crash into each other, they both have compatible crumple zones that act as a pillow, dispersing energy. But when an SUV or a truck crashes, that stiff chassis will not crumple and can send occupants flying out of the windshield or the windows instead. A stiff chassis also greatly increases the chances of getting whiplash or other head and neck injuries. So let's say that you live in a rural area where you're more likely to get into a crash either way. You might be speeding, you might be drunk, but it's okay, you feel safe. You're on a big road and you have a giant truck. But you make one mistake and your car crashes into another truck or another SUV. That impact is like two bricks colliding, which you just don't see as much in Europe. So to wrap all of this up, my argument is that American roads are more dangerous than European ones because corporate interests in the 1950s decided everybody needed a 4-ton vehicle. And it also doesn't help that American roads are designed to give drivers a false sense of safety. These giant trucks and flat roads cause riskier driving habits, which leads to more fatalities. And this isn't even considering pedestrian safety, which is becoming more and more dangerous in America every single year. So how can we stop this encroachment of giant trucks and giant SUVs on our roads? Well, the first thing that you can do is when you go to buy your next vehicle, seriously consider how big your vehicle needs to be. Keep in mind that a lot of SUVs actually have less trunk space than your average car to get that third row of seating in there, which could make daily tasks more difficult. Or cars like station wagons can still haul a pretty ridiculous amount and have better safety standards than your traditional RAV4. The other thing that we can do is to really push our lawmakers and legislators to create safety standards for if a truck runs into a car. There has to be a way for manufacturers to design their vehicles so that one vehicle crashing into another, smaller vehicle isn't a death sentence for the people who are in the smaller vehicle. Because if we don't want to live in a society that's dominated by pickup trucks, then we have to start speaking out about it now.